Geek Out! This is it. This is the... I'll be honest with you guys at home. When we started this little production of ours, this little Beatles show, I was kind of ready, and I think the other guys were kind of too. I mean, I'm speaking for them, obviously. Though I guess Jake's right here as well.
I am. I'll be silent.
And Chris can either nod or give me the middle finger, but... I mean, he'll give me the middle finger anyway. But I don't know. When we started this little Beatles podcast, by the way, I should probably introduce myself. If you haven't figured it out.
It's only the end.
It's only the end.
Really love you.
I'm Sam.
I'm Jake.
This is Deconstructing the Beatles, and we are, just about wrapped up with our deconstruction.
Yeah.
But when we started this, almost a year ago now, about a year ago, I was kind of ready to pull the plug on the whole Geek Out thing, and I don't know if the other guys were starting to feel burned out too, but I don't know. We weren't getting interviews every week. We weren't getting book reviews. We were just kind of like spinning our wheels, and we were kind of in the middle of some I don't know, I feel like we were just kind of feeling like we were getting close to the end, and this was kind of a suggestion of Jake's to kind of do individualized topical things, and it was the shot in the arm that followed immediately by starting to get interviews on a regular basis was the 1-2 punch we needed to really kick back in gear. And here we are now. I mean, we just got 1,000 listeners last month, which is incredible. That's just wild. But we might actually, now that I think about it, now by the time this thing posts, we don't do commentaries anymore, so we might rearrange our production schedule. Or release schedule.
Yeah? What you thinking?
I'm thinking, because FOC's on Monday. Mm-hmm. What if we put out the episodes on Monday, regular episodes on Mondays? Mm-hmm. What if we did, starting the week after we don't have commentaries? Mm-hmm. What if we did book reviews on Wednesdays and special episodes on Fridays?
Yeah.
So, I think that could maybe be doable. The only problem there is sometimes we have interviews like Monday, Tuesday night for the week of. So we'll play it fast and loose.
Again, like you said, it's our show.
We do whatever the fuck we
want.
want.
Yeah, we do whatever we want.
But you aren't here to hear us talk about the backstage, backdoor, unless you are, in which case we're done with it, so you can maybe...
It's boring.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Beatles.
Let's do it.
And let's do it in a concentrated dose one last time. So as I mentioned on the last episode, Beatles put out about 30 tracks that weren't for studio albums. They're just, non-album singles. They're on an EP. That was just the way the industry was. Albums at that point were filler. It was really the Beatles that revolutionized the idea of albums being like legitimate releases, something that you would actually look forward to. In between the latest single. And we went all the way through 1965. We've got a couple more songs from 65 on this week's. But yeah, this is it. This is kind of, and we'll kind of address that age-old topic. What do the Beatles mean for us?
Mm-hmm.
Why the Beatles? Why is it? I mean, it's something I've obviously been thinking about for the past year at least. So at least on record. Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's jump right in.
Do it.
The first song on this compilation, which is the 65 through 70, is Day Tripper.
Oh yeah.
It was released as a double A-side with We Can Work It Out because John Lennon refused to not release Day Tripper as a Christmas A-side single, and McCartney refused to not release We Can Work It Out.
Of course.
As a single. Maybe the first notable moment of contention between the two.
Yeah.
And so you've got the first double A-side. And if you think about it, a double A-side is maybe not the smartest idea from a commercial standpoint.
Yeah. But both solid tracks, of course, but Day Tripper, I could speak for myself, and I'm sure a lot of other people, when you when you're learning guitar, a lot of times, especially if you're taking a class or something, a lot of the first kind of big riff you learn is Day Tripper.
Yeah.
That was the case for me. I remember thinking it was so cool that I knew how to play a riff of a Beatles song.
Yeah. This, and there's another song, a couple songs down the line where I'm like, oh, the Beatles are guitarists.
Yeah. It's funny though, the first song I ever learned how to play, full song, was Brilliant Disguise by Bruce Springsteen, which is about his divorce.
Oh, okay.
I was a little kid. I was
mine was Warning by Green Day,
nice.
Off the album Warning.
By Green Day. Called Green Day. Yeah, in terms of riff, this was the first big thing, and it was so cool. I just remember just playing it over and over again, and it even got my mind exploring just other things, just messing around with scales and chord, all that kind of stuff. So just that simple riff, but again, a great song. Just a great little rock song by the Beatles that I think is a song that's super well known by the band. A lot of people, I think, when you think of the Beatles, think of Day Tripper. And it's also a snapshot of a period of the Beatles too.
Hendrix learns Day Tripper and covers Day Tripper, but the Day Tripper is kind of the Day Man. Yeah. Is about this.
One of the first things, though, I realized, I think listening to this song as a kid is the noticeable key change. That's something that, obviously so many songs do, but this song, I remember as a little kid, I experienced so many first things with the Beatles in terms of songs and structure. The key change was a big thing in this one. You clearly hear it with that riff,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the Day Tripper itself is is Lennon's talking about someone that basically just, kind of like Tinder, just hooks up with somebody for a day.
Yeah, no, I think the big thing is the driving force of the song, just the straight rock beat.
I love that, yeah.
Great vocals, great harmonies. They're a really great Beatles song.
Yeah, fantastic song coming in, spinning out of the Rubber Soul sessions. The other song, which was also, again, recorded during the Rubber Soul sessions, but was always intended to be an A-side single, not on the album, is We Can Work It Out.
I do love this song.
We Can Work It Out is my favorite of the two overall.
I would say that too. Yeah, I would say that as well.
Yeah, Day Tripper's got the better riff, but McCartney isn't trying to write a riff in We Can Work It Out.
Yeah.
The big addition that Lennon brings is, this is a song that basically everybody in the band except for John Lennon was like, this should be our Christmas single, and John Lennon was like, Day Tripper.
Yeah.
And to prove McCartney and the rest of the band right, We Can Work It Out did better on the radio, got more radio airtime.
Yeah.
Because, you've got the verses that are very clearly McCartney, like, hey, even though perhaps in reference to Jane Asher, who his on-again, off-again girlfriend for 3 years or 4 years, or, he's pleading with her, hey, we can, just because we're fighting doesn't mean we can't work it out. Whereas Lennon's writing the choruses and he's like, it is very short and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend.
And they get the dun, dun, dun,
and that the waltz melody after the stanzas and the chorus, that was a Harrison idea. It's let's do it like a waltz.
Yeah, the vocals on this are just so freaking cool, and I love the acoustic guitar. You can really hear that coming back into the verse, the big the strung patterns and what. But yeah, this is a song. I remember this is a song where I really sat and read the lyrics, and I was like, it's so clearly this personal song, and really liking. Because again, McCartney would very much write these stories, where this one, is clearly coming from, a personal place. Kind of coming from all that kind of all the, what was it, that the unofficial trilogy of how a relationship goes. This is that Coda song where it's hey man, obviously doesn't work out.
Yeah, release-wise, it would come right before For No One, if he's just seen a face and she's looking through him, and then he's trying to work it out, and then For No One.
Yeah. And then the unofficial opening to that for me was If I Fell.
Yeah. Help me understand.
But yeah, it's such a great melody. Again, for me, McCartney is the master melody, and this is a prime example.
You've got Lennon using his old Salvation Army harmonium, which you can see in the video promotional films for the. I think it gives it a nice kind of. It makes it vary from a lot of the songs from the period.
And again, I got to give Ringo props. I really like his drumming on this one.
Yeah, and again, the harmonium is kind of this almost a wind-driven keyboard. When I was a kid, I just thought they were using an accordion because nobody knows what the fuck a harmonium is. And then I was like, oh, that's what it is.
All right.
Yeah, my cousin in Brooklyn, he's a music producer. He has a harmonium, so I got to play around with it once. I was like, oh, this is not that fun. It's like a piano that you constantly have to crank.
Yeah. Sounds cool, though.
Yeah.
Name-wise and...
Did you ever see the MTV Unplugged with McCartney where he kind of he screws up the lyrics at first and he's like, hey, sorry, it's only been 45 years.
And
then plays. It's wild that it had been I guess it had been 30 years at that point where he was just hey.
Yeah, it was in the 90s, right?
Yeah. And he was just like, hey, just, kind of laughs it off.
Yeah.
The next one I think is, for me, one of the more iconic Beatles guitar licks. This was recorded during the Revolver sessions. It's Paperback Writer.
Yeah, you get that little gritty, angry distortion on there, which is very Revolver, psychedelic rock. thing.
The only song I think off the Revolver sessions they play live, because you can hear them play it like at the Budokan and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that was the one. Is that the one where Paul's mic is like flinging back and forth? He's just trying to like follow it, and they got those like awesome suits on, which I love that they reference in the Rock Band, I think. But
yeah, because one of the venues is the Budokan.
Yeah, one of my favorite things though, and I wish there was more of it, but at least we got a little bit of it, is in the Beatles anthology. I guess I don't know if it's the bonus or during the actual episode, but it's Paul, George, and Ringo are sitting around and they're talking about playing live, which is it's like no duh with the band, but like, you don't get a lot of that ever with the Beatles. And they're sitting there and they're talking about how hard it was doing the harmonies of Paperback Writer live, and it's one of my favorite moments. They're just sitting there talking about being a band, and so much of that I think gets lost in the shuffle of being the Beatles. And so yeah, they reference playing this live, and it being I think probably a pain in the ass, but yeah, I mean the riff is huge. How would you put this? Obviously, I mean, I guess obviously you like it more than Day Tripper, but do you like it more than We Can Work It Out, or is it just too different?
As an overall song, I probably like We Can Work It Out better, but as a good like driving song, and the bass work, the bass in Paperback Writer was intentionally mixed pretty loud.
Yeah.
And that in the next track, because it's
adds heaviness to it.
Yeah,
and it brings back the story-driven McCartney.
It does. He was trying to. One of his aunts was like, "Why do you always have to write about love songs?" He's like, "Fuck you!"
Actual writer trying to make his novel.
Yeah. I think Paperback Writer is one of those songs where if you're looking for why vinyl is so fucking cool, a song that really displays the dynamic warmth on the medium, Paperback Writer is a great song to kind of showcase on that.
Great, yeah. Just the riff is huge, but the vocals are just as big of a standout. Just the beginning of that song,
and you get John and George singing Frere Jacques over the last chorus, like Frere, just because they're just out of their mind on acid at this point.
Well, it's like when Freddie Mercury says "fried chicken" at the end of what was that one Queen song? Not Kind of Magic. It's a kind of. I can't remember. I'm blanking. But yeah, at the end he goes fried chicken, and his partner at the time was like, I think Freddie Mercury was like, should I say that? And he's like, you're fucking Freddie Mercury. You can say whatever you want.
Whatever you want, love.
One Vision. That would have killed me if I couldn't remember the time. It's One Vision, and at the end it's give me your hands, all right, give me. And instead of saying One Vision, he goes fried chicken, and he goes chicken, chicken, chicken. So listen to that song. It's not he doesn't hide it either, and that's the song that like if the solo series is what kept Geek Out together, One Vision is the song that kept Queen together, because that's when they started to go on a Queen tangent here real quick. That's the song that kept they credited it as Queen, not Freddie Mercury, not Brian May, because I think they were starting to get fractured, and the Wembley show was huge.
Yeah, it wasn't though. In our case, I don't. As far as I can tell, it wasn't fracturing. It was
no. But I mean, like just to put like One Vision is what. Was that shot in their shot in the arm, and the fact that he yells "fried chicken" at the end, fried chicken, chicken. That's a great song.
I mean, anything. I love fried chicken. Yes, the band. Yes, the beast. Or to take it back to the Beatles, it's like Lennon saying cranberry sauce at the end of Strawberry Fields Forever.
It's funny you mentioned Yes, because they put Give Peace a Chance in they sing All We Are Saying in I've Seen All Good People.
Which
is about chess.
My dad had recently picked up a shitty compilation too, might I add, of like solo Lennon tracks.
Yeah.
And the last song on the compilation is Give Peace a Chance.
Oh yeah.
And we get like halfway through and he's just like, they just keep doing this.
Yeah, that's a song that like I like the energy in the opening of it.
Yeah,
but I can't listen to the whole thing. I just go back and I'll listen to the beginning because because it's that's how I'd end my martial law movie. But two, I like the energy. But yeah, it really is just the same thing over and over again.
It's maybe not my favorite thing John Lennon's ever written.
No.
But the B-side of Paperback Writer, which John Lennon did write, also recorded during the Revolver sessions, might be better than the A-side. It's Rain.
Rain, rain. Oh, it's the best. It's one of the best things. It's in terms of musicianship, it's one of the best single tracks the Beatles ever did.
Those jangly guitars, the
vocals, guitars, the standout. What's more of a standout for you, the bass or the drums?
Drums.
Yeah. The drums, I mean, even Ringo.
Probably because it cues in the entire song.
Yeah, even Ringo's like, I was playing like a man possessed.
Yeah.
he's like, there's good drumming, there's bad drumming, and then there, or something along the lines of, but then there's rain. He's play, he's like, I can jam play well, but then there's rain. And rain is, it's such a great song. And again, Lennon.
First published use of backmasking too.
Oh yeah. Nice.
And because Lennon was obsessed with it, while he was there in the studio.
He was. Yeah. I remember just reading stories where he's like, dude, play it back.
Yeah. Well, during the Revolver sessions, the first time he hears it is by accident, like a lot of the innovations the Beatles kind of employed. He's hanging out in the studio. They're playing back something, and it sounded so like surreal, and he was just like, oh, can we do that like on a record? And they were like, yeah. And so he has like the backwards lyrics in Rain, which again was the first time it's ever been done. And then because of that, every track on Revolver or during the Revolver sessions, they played bits of it backwards to see if it would work. And sometimes, Tomorrow Never Knows has it. I'm Only Sleeping has it. I think those are the only.
There's the two big ones.
Yeah.
That I can remember.
But yeah, those are. Rain is just the Beatles. Again, the bass, like you were saying, awesome. But yeah, for me, it's the drums.
Okay. Yeah, the bass is very much the lead instrument on this one, in terms of just it lays down the groove, but it adds so much more than just the root note kind of thing. And I think that's something that McCartney really helped employ. I think I wouldn't consider him the greatest rock bassist, but and I wouldn't say that anyway because I'm no bass player, but I think he's one of the more underrated ones, and which might sound funny because he's in the Beatles, but I think again people forget that like they fucking played instruments. They weren't just this like entity.
You listen to Paperback Writer, both the guitar and the bass, and you're like, oh, that's right, they're proper musicians. Or you listen to the drums in Rain, and you're like, oh, Ringo is actually quite a good drummer.
Yeah,
we just give him shit because he's not the most technical drummer.
Yeah, and again, how good are the Beatles? None of these fucking songs are on albums. Yeah. These are not on any of their albums.
Fucking Rain is a B-side.
Rain is a B-side and not on any of their albums.
Yeah. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. And there's a bit of a the Beatles don't really put out a lot of I guess they put out Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane originally as a non-album single, but those show up on that one album that we all have, Magical Mystery Tour. That was their Christmas single in '66, but they don't actually put out another non-album single until like early 1968.
Yeah.
Which is to say like Lady Madonna.
Grooves.
Yeah.
All these songs are fucking groove. We Can Work It Out's got a groove, but like all these other songs are just fucking groove heavy,
They're so awesome. Lady Madonna, along with the B-side to this one, was recorded during the Yellow Submarine sessions. The Beatles knew that they were going to spend a couple months in India, so they ended up recording a bunch of songs, some of which will be on the album Yellow Submarine. Some are released in advance of their trip because, again, they know they're not going to be in the studio while they're on the other side of the world. And Lady Madonna was the big one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
remember? Yeah. I guess Hey Bulldog, but yeah.
Yeah.
If we're counting like songs we've talked about up to this point on this album or the compilation, Lady Madonna for me over all the other ones so far.
Really?
Lady Madonna is one of my favorite fucking Beatles songs of all time. The piano and the and again the and like just that mixed
kazoo and everything.
Yeah, mixed with like again McCartney telling this kind of like adult story.
Lady Madonna. He's basically doing like a Fats Domino voice.
Yeah.
He's kind of like, he just kind of was making, like doing a Fats Domino impersonation. When he was kind of playing around with it in the studio, he was still using that voice, and he's like, oh, it fits.
Yeah, and then also the way the song ends, the bam, 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 bam. It's so good. I love it, man. It's one of my favorite piano things ever. I love it.
It's not quite like Lovely Rita, like piano solo level.
Oh, yeah. Well, also, yeah, again, because I don't think Martin touches anything on the piano with this one. It's all Macca, but it's just a great. You ever say groove a million times, but like it's so
groovy,
such a tight groove and great. All the above, like all the instruments are bringing it. Again, this is just showing how, progression wise, how tight of a band they are, and they were tight of a band in the beginning because they were playing 8-9 hours or whatever these long sets in Hamburg.
According to Jeff Emmerich, the sound engineer for these sessions, he was like, "This is the last time where like they were just a full on. There wasn't the tension wasn't prevalent every session."
Yeah.
So, along with the next one, which was "The Inner Light" by George Harrison, the first time a George Harrison song is released as a single, albeit a B-side in this case. This was a song that he had written and recorded the instrumental parts for, because he goes in India in advance of the rest of the band in '66. That's where he really he meets the Maharishi and everything, and he's like, he comes back, and within 2 years, he convinces the rest of the band to do the transcendental meditation out there. But while he's there that first time, he writes and records the instrumental parts to this song, and then he polishes it off during the Yellow Submarine sessions in early '68. And apparently, like, McCartney and Lennon, in contrast to some of his other songs up until this point, fucking love The Inner Light. It's probably my favorite of the Indian influenced, like Over Within You, Without You, Over Love You Too. I guess those are the only major Harrison Indian influenced songs. But
yeah,
I mean, he plays sitar on other songs, but those are the ones where it's just like, let's have George.
Yeah, it's just in there, or it gives a cool flair to it.
But this one stands above those two.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. I mean, I never was big on that, in the Beatles.
It always seemed out of place for you.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it was something that obviously, music wise or whatever, just the ideas and just being around, that trip they took, it obviously had a big impact on the Beatles and was obviously huge for George Harrison. But yeah.
Okay.
That's all I gotta say about that.
I will say that, like, if heaven is a place on earth.
Yeah.
If it does actually, like, I always imagined, like,
till now, I always relied on my own. I never really cared until I met you. When that song plays in my car, like when I play it, I only sing the backing vocals. Oh. Like I only come in for the backing. I Nancy Wilson it.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
Do you do that? Like,
of course.
But
yeah.
like when
maybe not so alone.
No, but here's an example. When I listen to Who's Next, I only sing the Pete Townsend parts. I don't sing anything else.
You don't sing the Roger Daltrey parts.
Well, I can't. It's embarrassing. Like even if I'm by myself,
in the field.
Yeah. Even if I'm by myself, I'm fucking embarrassed.
In the hedge wasteland.
But yeah, I do. For some reason, I do. Like I'll just pick whatever and just sing those parts. Sometimes I can't help myself. I screech into like the worst high pitched Daltrey, just worst. Yeah. Just terrible. No, that's just like blackout inducing. But yeah.
No, I would. What I'm trying to say is, I would imagine like The Inner Light to play like as like. There's two songs that I associate with kind of like afterlife connotations for whatever reason. This is like kind of like an almost like out of body experience. This is The Inner Light's one of them. The other one's the Pyramid Song by Radiohead.
Interesting, because I have two songs for you.
Okay.
Like if the pearly gates open, the first thing you hear,
or the fiery gates, depending on how I'm doing.
Well, that's two other songs. Actually, only one. Altar Sacrifice by Slayer, the Praise Hell Satan. When you're like actually entering hell in the song, the whammy bars.
The Ave Santani.
Yeah. Transforming 5 toes to 2 is one of the weirdest lyrics of all time. I guess it just means cuts them off, I guess. But the gates are opening. When we saw Heart live and they did that middle section to Magic Man, the synth, that is what it feels like. Also, the intro to Bob O'Reilly, the synth, and just like the doors opening, like that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, yours are more kick ass. Mine are more kind of like.
I mean, they're heavenly, but yes, it's the synth and the.
Yeah. Whereas it's Tom York, right? He just has an H in it.
I've always said Tom.
Yeah, York. Tom York. He writes the Pyramid Song specifically about what people see when they have the near death experience.
That being said, speaking of him, like. Everything in its Right Place would be another Heaven song. That is like that. I've equated that to that sounds like what the warm sun hitting your face feels like. Yeah. First thing in the morning.
Well, it's
also my favorite album.
They do this really cool thing on the Love compilation. To take it back to the Beatles a bit, where they
guess might as well now.
Yeah, they've got the Inner Light going, and then it cuts. I think it cuts to like the backing vocals in Here Comes the Sun with like they're just going sun, here comes. Yeah, that's kind of like and I always imagine. I guess we're going like fucking spiritual on this one. It's the last one. We're thinking.
Everybody's talking about bagism, tagism, rag. Yeah.
Fucking give peace a chance. Fuck you, John. Fuck you. That's Baby's first song, not I'm a loser.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm just going to write the same thing and sing it again. All I am saying, this song sucks, but the, truly.
And truly.
I always imagined like heaven would be kind of like Myst. Like remember that like computer game,
like The Mist with Thomas Jane.
No, where he shoots his own son
and screams, crying as the credits roll.
No, like
that's heaven.
Yeah. For Thomas Jane.
Yeah. Is this heaven? No, it's The Mist.
Just get carried off by one of those weird like bug things.
Yeah.
No, I always thought it would be like the computer game Myst. Yeah,
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, check it out one of these times if you get the chance. It was on Windows 95. Hey, speaking of the Beatles, the next song is "Hey Jude."
Oh yeah, it's over.
Yeah,
that's it.
It's the number one performing Beatles single in the United States.
The
best. It's fantastic. It's like over 7 minutes long.
It's the best, and most of it is nonsense words.
Yeah.
It's I think in terms of a full Beatles effort, in terms of like all the Beatles being on it and a jam, it's probably my favorite Beatles like thing ever. Like, For No One, of course, but the problem I have with For No One is just like two Beatles on it, But, I remember McCartney talked about Ringo was out like taking a piss or something, using the restroom, and he almost missed the drum cue. And he got in right, like when you hear the drums.
This was recorded semi-live.
Yeah, when the drums kick in, he gets there just in time to start the drum thing. And McCartney's like, it's magic. He also says fuck on it.
Fucking hell.
Well, once you hear it, you'll never unhear it.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to know that, don't listen for it. Because if you don't know it's there, you don't really hear it.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I read something about like McCartney or Lennon saying, I wanted to prove McCartney was a bad boy or, fucked up like the rest of us. He wasn't this angel man.
Left it in the final mix.
Yeah. Fucking hell. But it's talk about heavenly. Like it's just this joyous, wonderful, like near perfect song. It's so good.
Yeah,
it's one of the best. It's up there. A Day in a Life. If A Day in a Life is like the Beatles coming together as like this force and changing kind of song structure and music and how you do things and how you record. Hey Jude is just a example of them sitting down and making just great music.
It's, I think, the one bright point for the band in the entire Fractitious White Album sessions.
Yeah, and again, we've said it a million times, but I think this song over any other song. This is not on any of their albums.
Yeah.
Hey Jude is not on one of their studio albums.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy to me. That's almost as crazy as them not touring.
I mean, they did stop touring effectively like from like in September of 66.
Yeah.
They hadn't been touring like for over 2 years at the point that Hey Jude comes out.
Yeah.
They'll make public appearances.
Do they play it? Is it on the Smothers Brothers that they play it?
I think so, yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
Everyone loves the Smothers Brothers,
yeah.
like The Who.
Yeah, I love that performance where they play it, and the whole studio audience is there. And when I went to Abbey Road on the River, they had a bunch of like glossy photos that's on spread out on the table, like the scene in Batman '89 with all the and you could just buy them, for a couple bucks here and there. And I bought one of my favorite photo shoots is when they're like standing on the roof and the wind's blowing and like Lennon and McCartney are like squaring off.
Yeah.
And I think McCartney's got like a pink suit or something like that, like a very like
loud.
kind of loud suit. And
very Austin Powers.
Neither of them have facial hair at that point, but they have kind of like the long, cool hair that I could never grow. And the other one,
I tried.
Yeah,
it gets weird.
There's a moment in How I Met Your Mother where Ted, his hair's like growing out, and they have like a daydream what's going to happen. 3 years is the trilogies episode, and his hair's like long and flowing. He's like, I told you one day it would grow down and stop growing out. I was like, that's me, bro. But the other one is I got some glossy photos of Paul, them at the piano and the entire studio and singing along. That's one of my favorite Beatles moments of all time.
Oh yeah, they're just
so good.
Like, they're having fun. John always, to his dying day, thought that Hey Jude was about him.
Mm-hmm.
The story behind Hey Jude is that John's in the middle of divorcing his first wife Cynthia Lennon, and of course they have a son, Julian Lennon.
Mm-hmm.
I should have made up some sort of not Lennon last name, but their son Robert.
Yeah.
Robert Stanley.
Yeah. Robert Stanley.
And Hey Rob, the
don't make it Rob.
So McCartney, of course, has known Cynthia since the beginning because, he's been tied with John. So, of course, he would get to know his wife. And he just couldn't believe that this woman he had known for years and watched her son kind of grow up, they were suddenly, functionally persona non grata because it was not a happy divorce. It was a very acrimonious divorce. And so he goes to visit them, and on the car ride over, he writes Hey Jude to kind of comfort Julian. And if you look at the lyrics, though, to Lennon's credit, it's a song about somebody encouraging somebody to go pursue somebody romantically.
Yeah.
And so John always thought it was McCartney unconsciously telling John to pursue Yoko.
Mm-hmm.
And as much of a narcissist or self-centered as Lennon could be sometimes, I kind of have to almost, looking at those lyrics.
Well, I had heard about that. Also, I heard, he originally, I guess he was going to call it Hey Jules, and he's like, it doesn't work as well. But the idea that McCartney was writing about himself as well for Linda. My favorite Hey Jude moment story is the line about the movement you need is on your shoulder. And he plays it, just one of those moments. It'd be a fly on the wall where McCartney plays the song for the first time just to Lennon. And he's like, "Oh, he stops and he goes, "Don't worry, I'm going to change that bit. That doesn't work because you say, movement twice or shoulder twice. It doesn't sound good."
Well, no, McCartney's thing was it makes it sound like I'm a pirate, like it was something on my shoulder, like a parrot on my shoulder.
Well, yeah. I'd also heard that he said, I think he says the word, a word multiple, twice in the same area that it sounds. He doesn't like the sound of it, and he goes, "Oh, I'm changing that." And either Lennon was being he honestly believed it, or he was like, "Fuck him, watch him drown." He said that was his favorite line in the whole song. And so, if you ever have the joy of seeing Paul McCartney live or a video of him playing it live, when he gets to that line, not always, but he looks up because that's the line he says now. When he gets to that line, it's really emotional for him because that is his and John's little moment in that song, which I always liked. But Lennon definitely did see it as, he was saying, it's okay, go get Yoko, and McCartney could have been subconsciously writing, "Hey, go get Linda," and it all stemmed from none of that. Yeah. It stems from Paul being the good uncle and trying to support Julian through his hard time.
No, it's a lot of fun.
How many babies do you think were named Jude in '68?
Well, it was a Christmas single, wasn't it? So. No, it was a summer single. Oh, so there's still time.
They bang and they're like, "We're naming him Jude, male or fucking female."
68
Jude.
to 69, probably lots.
I've never met a Jude.
I've never met a Jude. There's Jude Law.
Jude Law, yeah. Jude Law.
Who I've never met.
I've never met Jude Law.
Yeah. But he exists, so far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
The B-side to Hey Jude is Revolution.
Yeah.
Which Lennon was like, "This is an A-side," and they were like, "No, and put it on the B-side."
Hey Jude is forever A.
Yeah,
it's an A, A plus. Revolution's great. I mean, we talked about the acoustic Revolution, which is all right, but this one slays it.
Yeah, hand over fist,
and just distortion and the scream and the promo where McCartney looks like a old man.
Yeah, he's got the pants up to his tits.
Yeah, and he's got that baseball jersey kind of shirt that kids wore back in the day, and it just looked ridiculous.
He's basically wearing pajamas.
Yeah.
But
he does the scream. It's awesome. And I know, didn't they plug something they
guitar right into the soundboard?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Which overloads the channel.
And just overloaded the fuck out of it, and it was just distortion and awesome.
Yeah, it's probably the most rock and roll late period Beatles song.
Yeah, straight just reckless abandon outside of Helter Skelter.
Yeah, and on that live version with Pajama McCartney, you've got the they kind of do a
granny shit. He is living the dream.
Yeah.
He's come full circle.
The student becomes the master. The father becomes the son.
Yeah.
They kind of do a hybrid version because they're doing the Shooby Doo Wops.
Yeah, I do like that.
Yeah.
McCartney looks like he's having a good time, and Harrison's like, "Just fucking get this over with."
Yeah, I'm clean shaven for once. Enjoy it.
I want to be in my garden.
Yeah. He's wearing the orange shirt, if I remember correctly.
Mm.
The next song on the compilation actually was on an album, but they didn't know it at the time. It came out in early '69. It was just the single version of "Get Back." because they never knew that they thought that those sessions they was just chalking it up as a loss. Like, well, I guess we just wasted 2 months of our lives and basically broke up the band. So yeah, that's, I mean, we've already talked about Get Back. You can listen to the Let It Be episode, but the B-side is not on the original version of Let It Be. It's Don't Let Me Down.
Crash. It's awesome.
Yeah. That was a song, again, written and recorded during the Get Back sessions, which became Let It Be, written by Lennon. I'm kind of surprised given the not as many Lennon songs on. I guess, again, they figured since it had come out as a B-side, they're like, we'll just leave it off. Yeah, we have to have Get Back, but we don't have to have Don't Let Me Down, which is, they also play it during the rooftop concert.
Yeah.
There's that one line in the song where it's like, nobody ever really ever done me. Oh, she done me. She done me good. I can't ever keep a straight face.
Yeah.
Like when that comes on or when I'm like singing it or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in love for the first time.
That, two things about that. That's my favorite section. Doom, doom, doom. Don't you know it's gonna last? How fucking shitty do you think Cynthia Lennon felt hearing that?
I would hope that she just didn't.
She was just like, fuck it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember, Lennon's clearly, love for, talking about Yoko. But the hardest, Ringo ever hits a fucking crash is in this song, the intro, and the story goes to give Lennon the courage to scream, because after that, it's just there's nothing with him. He's not playing like a chord well. He's just screaming the intro to the song, and it's a really great raw song. I think is one of the better things that come out of those sessions.
Yeah. Again, I wish it was on the album.
Yeah, it's on Let It Be Naked.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Which is the stripped down reissue from 2003. But yeah, it's a great number. The next one was recorded in between the Let It Be and Abbey Road sessions, kind of this final like hurrah between McCartney and Lennon just as a duo, because they record 2 songs during that sessions, and the first one, of course, is the Ballad of John and Yoko.
Oh yeah, gets banned for a couple of reasons, but I love McCartney's higher pitched harmony vocals on this. It's just it is a fun song. I like the song. I don't know about you, but I dig it.
I like. I mean, the Ballad of John Yoko is fine. I don't know why it hit number 1 on the charts, but fuck it, it's the Beatles.
Yeah.
Of course it'll hit number 1 on the charts.
Yeah. Again, it's so much almost just a Lennon solo track, but then they throws in, and Paul plays drums on this one as well. So
yeah, cool. George and Ringo aren't on the Ballad of John and Yoko at all, and they kind of tease that where John's talking to Paul, who's playing the drums, like, hey, watch those drums, Ringo, and he's like, and then to which Paul responds on the recording, okay, George,
yeah,
because they're George is on holiday and Ringo's filming The Magic Christian with Peter Sellers. Never actually seen that movie. It could be fucking terrible for all I know. Maybe you should have been in the Ballad of John and Yoko.
Yeah. The bap bap bap.
Yeah, it's you want to go into the reasons why it was banned on BBC Radio?
Well, there's the line, they're going to crucify me.
Yeah.
Which is a big
preceded by Christ.
Yeah.
Christ, you know it ain't easy.
I've heard the version where they cut out crucify, like on the, I don't know if they still do it. I don't think they still do it on the radio, but like,
I hope not.
I've heard it. Like, I've heard the version where it's just terrible. But yeah, Christ and crucify all within the same breath almost. It's going to get you a ban in the late 60s.
Yeah. It's kind of really like the most thinly veiled autobiography. I mean, the name of the song is about John Yoko.
Yeah, I mean, like they're talking about stuff like they just did,
Yeah,
where they're flying to and what they did. And,
yeah, because Lennon had written it while he was on his honeymoon with Yoko about his honeymoon with Yoko.
Yeah.
They're talking about having the bed-ins and stuff and bagism. Fuck. Fucking give peace a chance. Fucking give peace a chance. Fuck that. When I saw Ringo and the All-Star Band live, the song they concluded with
was
Give Peace a Chance.
How?
But I would have rather they concluded with this next one, Old Brown Shoe.
A great bass line. One of my favorite bass lines.
You know who plays the bass on this one?
Paul McCartney.
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's George Harrison. He was like, oh, Paul did really good bass on, in some interview after the fact, like somebody was interviewing George Harrison, and they were like, "I really like the bass line. I thought Paul did a good job on Old Brown Shoe," and George was like, "Actually, I did the bass line on Old Brown Shoe."
Fascinating.
Because he's like, "I played it like I play the guitar."
Fascinating.
So that's probably why it's so distinct.
Yeah, because it is a great bass line.
Yeah, it's the highlight, I think. Of
and he has a little nod to Ringo in it.
Mm-hmm.
When I grow up, I'll be a singer. Wear rings on every finger.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. I like the song a lot. It's a funky, cool song, and the bass line, regardless of who plays it, is fantastic. I love a good bass line.
Tom Petty covers it for Concert for George.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a winner. B-side to the Ballad of John and Yoko. Next one was released. Was originally released on Let It Be, or it was eventually released on Let It Be. But again, they didn't know it at the time. It was a Christmas promo single for a charity. It was just a single version of Across the Universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you've heard Across the Universe on Let It Be, you've heard the single version of Across the Universe. And again, you can listen to the Let It Be episode to figure what we think of that. And the song Let It Be, which was released as an A-side single in advance of the album, but the B-side to Let It Be was You Know My Name.
Oh.
Look up the number.
You know my name. One of the best.
Good evening and welcome to Slaggers.
But McCartney's always talked about this being one of his favorite Beatles songs. Just because he's like, you had to be there. You had to be there to just the jam. You got Brian Jones on sax.
Yeah. I guess, did this song come out after?
I think it did.
Yeah, because he dies in, 69?
68, 69. I mean, this song, I think it came out afterwards. But, I think there's two different versions, too, like a shorter and a longer version, too.
Yeah, and they had recorded it years in advance. But they polished it off in the same session that they recorded the Ballad of John and Yoko.
Mm.
And that was just, even though John and Paul's relationship wasn't as close as it had been, they were, basically sharing the same space, a very small home studio with a mic set up in between them. And Jeff Emmerich, who had watched the band disintegrate over the years, was just fascinated that even through all these, they were having such a good time recording this song. Probably because it's just such a joke song. Like I think Lennon's story was he came over to McCartney's house for a writing session or something, and there was a phone book somewhere, and he just, like, one of the ads on the cover of the phone book was, you know my name, look up the number.
Yeah, Lennon was just like, we're going to write a song with just one phrase. And McCartney was like, let's do it. Sweet.
That's how it went.
It's hard to, explain. It's like, what, 3 or 4 different parts. It's, nonsense. It's funny. It's very much their humor. But at the same time, a pretty cool song, It's not unlistenable. It's not like a muck nothingness. It's
muck nothingness.
It's really a cool song. I think it might be my brother's favorite Beatles song. He loved. Well, I don't know. He doesn't listen to the Beatles that much, but he loves this song whenever I'd play it or we'd talk about it. It's fun. It's just a lot of fun, And it's the closest you get to a Beatles Stones crossover, in studio form.
Officially, yeah, because Jagger and Richards do sing backing vocals on
All You Need Is Love.
All You Need Is Love during the Our World broadcast because they're part of the studio audience. But they're part of the studio audience. It's not like they have their own mic set up. But yeah, You Know My Name, look up the number. Look up the number. You know my name.
And then McCartney goes, really loud in the background. My brother always thought it was the funniest thing. Is because everyone's singing, but McCartney just starts screaming, and it doesn't even matter if it's on key. He just that's the funniest part. One of the funniest parts. There's a lot of funny parts in that song.
There is. There's slaggers with the Dennis O'Bell.
Yeah, Dennis over. Let's hit Dennis over. Yeah.
So now that we're at the end of all things,
you know my name.
You know my name.
You know my name.
We've just lost our fucking minds. Yeah. Bagism, tagism, hagism. So what is it about the Beatles?
I think mostly, again, I kind of touched on a little bit during this episode, was they really introduced me to a lot of things that they introduced the world to when they came out, And again, they just happen, there's so many talented bands coming out around that time. It is amazing to think about, the British invasion. But they happen to be the perfect four guys to show, first of all, what a true band is. It wasn't one guy leading a bunch of other guys. It was, behind the scenes, it wasn't four equal parts, really, because, in terms of writing. But it was this, this group. It was like one of the first real bands people ever saw. Trailblazers in that sense. And for me, just as like a fan of music stuff, it really is what they did in the studio. Like you've said, we've said, using that studio as an instrument and pushing the envelope to the extreme, past the extreme, and never, and never questioning, is this something we can do or not? Just doing it, and that fearlessness in the studio, as well as the fact that you look at like how big they were, and the fact that they stopped touring.
Yeah, which is kind of like should be the death knell for a lot of bands.
Even
now.
Yeah, I mean, they broke everything. Like they allowed bands who came after them. I remember I think it was the OK Go and like something. They were like, there was a list, the 100 greatest bands or whatever, influential. And the Beatles were, of course, number one. And they said they've influenced everyone on this list, even if they came before the Beatles. But like. It was something where, and I think a lot of people, I've talked to some people who are just annoyed by the Beatles because they're always like...
They're so ubiquitous.
Yeah, they've become this big thing. I think Lennon also talks about, at the end of the day, they were just a good band. They were just a great band, But I think it was so much this aspect of they broke down any kind of barrier and doors for bands to do whatever they wanted. There was no more this like system you had to follow. And the funny thing is, the kind of ironic thing is though, that so many people followed exactly what the Beatles did. That double album signals Trouble, or like that's the Make or Break album for look at The Wall for Christ's sake. Even The River, look at that double album. But that idea, like so many bands after that went to that mysticism, or so many bands, when they want to grow up, they grow their facial hair, But again, I think it's so much of like them just blowing down the doors and happening to be that perfect thing that kids of that age needed and musicians needed, that kick in the ass to really usher in the era of pop music.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's three. I've always divided the. You've probably heard it on the show. I've divided the Beatles into three periods, and each of them has their own appeal and their own thing that makes them timeless. The early Beatles, 1962 through 1964, really, or 65 through Help, is kind of this. It's the fact that there are these four guys that are just having so much fun, and that fun and energy is just so contagious. That's what makes the early Beatles. That's where Beatlemania springs up. This that they're so effervescent that it just kind of spread into and just drove audiences wild on both sides of the Atlantic and eventually around the world. The middle period Beatles is that kind of studio as an instrument thing. The experimental Beatles, the idea of Rubber Soul through Really Magical Mystery Tour to, you could argue, Yellow Submarine as well, where they are trying new things, stuff that pop bands didn't do. Who uses a fucking Salvation Army harmonium?
Yeah.
In a pop song. Who uses like a French horn? Who uses? You used to say that Eleanor Rigby was like one of the most punk rock songs of all time because it's got the full orchestra.
Well, for me, Eleanor Rigby is the greatest pop song of the 20th century because it uses what as Paul would call it, the pop music of old with classical music, and it uses the classical music of today with the pop music, and it blends it into one thing. Yeah. Eleanor Rigby is a perfect example of why the Beatles matter, why they're so huge. And again, all of this being said, all these episodes being wrapped up in the one thing, they were together, like this lineup, for 8 years.
Yeah, they're. We've talked on the show, like, would they have mattered as much as if they continued on after the Abbey Road sessions? Maybe not.
Well, again, I think that's something that's huge too. Like, I think one of the reasons they're seen as like this godlike thing in music is because they had this shelf life of 8 years. We never really saw them fail. Like, yes, Get Back sessions didn't work, but they still got Let It Be, and it has its moments on it. But we never saw this like, oh man, they I saw them on tour recently, and they don't have it anymore.
We never got the pipes of peace of the Beatles.
Yeah, they went all did their own things, but the Beatles are forever 29 years old. That's the oldest the Beatles will ever get.
Yeah,
and I don't know. They just blueprint. They let this blueprint for so many things, but also the idea of in classic Beatles fashion, they didn't like they didn't shatter the doors and windows. They just opened that door that everyone else was afraid to open. And they were like, "Come on, it's okay," and they just went down, and that was it. It wasn't anything. It wasn't like this. Other bands, did it because then obviously afterwards you get the Stones, you get the Kinks, you get the Who, you get all these other bands, and talk about like Zeppelin and stuff. And it wasn't like, oh, years down the road they felt the Beatles. It's fucking instantaneous. You know what I mean? Like you get the not so great stuff where like the Stones try to be the Beatles on Satanic,
Satanic Majesty's Request.
But then you get the Who doing Who Sell Out, which is very much their response to Sgt. Pepper. And makes Pete Townsend think of music in a different way, and it inspires him. Jimi Hendrix as well. So it's instantaneous in that way.
Brian Wilson.
Yeah, of course. With the Beach Boys being paramount, and the Beach Boys inspiring the Beatles. It wasn't just a one band game. I think the Beach Boys are a prime example of being the best competition the Beatles ever had. At least in the second act Beatles, if you want to put it that way.
Now, third act Beatles for me, which kind of reinforces the shelf life theory, is because they succeed in creating such beautiful fucking music in the White Album, to a lesser extent Let It Be, but certainly in like Abbey Road, because they're succeeding almost in spite of themselves.
Yeah.
It's no longer a friendly competition, but they're still competing and they're still a band. Yeah,
and it wasn't like we have to preserve our legacy, because again, it is fascinating to like listen to like people talk about the Beatles in like 70, 71, 72, 73, because even though like it hasn't totally been felt in the sense that like, yes, they inspire like other bands and stuff, and you're inspired by the Beatles whether you like it or not, because you're doing what the Beatles are doing or you're not doing what the Beatles are doing. But at the time they're like, oh, the Beatles will probably get back together. But then it isn't until like the 80s, and unfortunately when Lennon is murdered, that they really realized. I think they realized it when the Beatles were a band, but then a decade down the line, a decade plus, and of course as the farther we go, like how special that was.
Yeah. There was it a friend of like Aerosmith's or something that saw Lennon once at a party, and at that time nobody gave a shit much.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to remember who it was that. It was one of the guys. He was a musician as well, but he was on the Gilbert Gottfried podcast. It's one of my favorite episodes. He helped write a bunch of Aerosmith tracks. Right. One of them being Living on the Edge, which is one of my favorite ones. Yeah, and he was at a party because he was a pretty popular guy in the 70s. He was in I think his brothers and him did a thing. I can't remember his name. I'm not going to be able to remember. Anyway, but he saw Lennon, and yeah, it wasn't because music kept going after the Beatles, obviously. The Stones were massive. The Who were massive. Kiss was coming up there. Led Zeppelin was huge. Queen was huge. But yeah, and so there was this period where people, I think, were like, oh, that was fun, from a public standpoint. And it is fascinating too to hear like people, I remember hearing musicians who were big and were inspired by the Beatles, hearing Let It Be and being like, I'm kind of done with the Beatles, because they were like, they're not going forward anymore. And so, that is sad, but it is, it is kind of like, time for the Beatles to end kind of thing. And, it being also tragic with, obviously the murder of Lennon, but that idea that the Beatles never got back together. Of course, they work on Real Love and Free as a Bird, but, they never, and it's fucking sad. I mean, like, of course, we would have loved to have seen it, keeping them as, this 29-year-old, thing, whatever. We'd love to see the Beatles get back together, but in a way that kind of crystallized that what made the Beatles so great. Yeah. Because, look, the Stones, I've never seen them live, but they're still kicking ass live. All these other bands are still doing great things live. Yeah. But there's always that little doubt moment.
There's always the moment where I'm like, do you still need to, and I think I forget what episode, it may have been on the regular podcast, where I was like, do you still have to put out studio albums after a certain point?
Yeah.
Like, people that go to these shows don't go because you have a new album out. They go out because you're there.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, I think, when I sent you that Pete Townsend interview where he talks about, like, he doesn't own those songs anymore, and is it their job to bring them back to that time? Because they can find another band that'll do it for them. that'll take them there to that moment, that escapism, whatever it is you want to call it, whatever, rock and roll or music means to you. But yeah, the Beatles, they weren't even around long enough for that to happen, really in those 8 years. So, I think at the end of the day, I think it's really what they did for just music in general, just opening that door, not smashing it down, but opening that door and be like, hey, let's fucking play. Like, let's play with the studio, let's play music, and let's, inadvertently change the world. Because it is crazy to think, like, there's just these, like, kids from Liverpool, and they, at the time, had no idea what they were doing. Not what they were doing, but they had no idea what they were in for. Nobody did. And then,
yeah.
It all changed,
They were a band. I think one of the things that kept them together as long as it did and kept them effective as long as it did is they were certainly aware of the magnitude, but I don't think they ever fell in love with their own legend.
Yeah, I think, they...
Certainly as self-deprecating as Lennon would be.
Oh, yeah, I think their humor helped a lot. Their upbringing helped a lot, too.
With George Harrison was the producer on The Ruddles, which is the faux documentary on a basically mock Beatles band in the 70s. And when they were writing like jokes for the Ruddles, like some that would be particularly like acerbic and really cut into the Beatles' legacy. At one point, George was like, "Hey, we used to be the never mind." Like he just realized the absurdity of it all.
Well, yeah, and Lennon did that too, like the Big Brother thing, where like you can make fun of your little brother, but when someone else does, you want to fucking punch him in the face. And I've seen interviews where he was like that, where like someone's like, "Oh, you mentioned the Stones," and he'd be really nasty about the Stones, Which I feel like, again, we've talked about, like, I think Lennon, had a thing out for that, but I don't think McCartney ever gave a shit.
Yeah. I think, Lennon, I think, always was jealous of the Stones, particularly Keith Richards.
Yeah.
And really, it was more so he tolerated Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
And Jagger was the one that was more taken by the Beatles. He was like, let's do His Satanic Majesty's Request and everything.
But then you get, like, Let It Bleed, which is much more of, like, a jab, you know.
And
Such
then
a big title too.
Yeah, it is.
It's so fucking metal.
Yeah, it really is. 69 Stones, man.
Yeah.
But McCartney was just like, "Oh, we wrote your first hit."
Yeah, exactly.
That for it with that's how McCartney. Like I saw an interview that McCartney did for the Desert concert, the Desert show where the Stones and McCartney played, and someone was like, "What does it? How does it feel like?" Watching the, still playing with the Stones 50 years later, and he's like, "Oh, we knew Mick and Keith when they were first starting the band, and watching them grow and everything." He's like, "How do you feel Beatles versus Stones?" He's like, "Well, you have to remember, like John and I wrote their first hit, and that's really about."
I would always use that whenever we like at a bar, like people would always talk about that and be like, "They wrote their first hit."
Yeah, and so just like period, the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I stand on the whole. And on the show we've mentioned like Beatles versus Stones.
Oh yeah.
I love both, but
yeah, we've talked a lot about how much we love the Stones.
Yeah, they're great. They're a fantastic band. But the Beatles, man.
Yeah, it's all about the Beatles in the end, man. It's all about the boys.
Yeah. And, in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
Yeah.
So, and it's weird. We're done.
No more. We're never gonna talk about the Beatles.
We
ever
are never
again.
Oh my God, we're never gonna talk about the Beatles again. I can't even listen. I was gonna listen to like Abbey Road on the way home. Now I'm gonna have to listen to like who's no. I just like I was like trying to find something that was like complete. I was like, who's next? That's actually a good album. We can't do that. We can't do that. Yeah,
Turn on the Kermit.
Yeah, I can't find a shitty album to not.
Yeah.
I mean, I have plenty of shitty albums. One of my favorite bands in the whole wide world is Blink-182, so.
But no, thanks for bringing me on this adventure.
Yes, this magical mystery tour of ours.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I know, you're probably excited to get to other things and take a break from talking about music.
I mean, maybe talking about, this really has made me realize that over obviously I love movies, obviously I love comics, obviously I love television, but music for me is the great. Music, movies, comics, and television doesn't make me feel the way that music makes me feel.
Yeah, but also for
granted,
me,
they
like,
don't really try.
Music you can take everywhere, and I know you can with comics and movies. But music is something that you could just be walking down the street and listening to music. You could be driving your car listening to music. You can do everything. Movies, of course, you can have on in the background, but you're not going to be like walking in the street listening to a movie. I mean, maybe you do. Who knows? or you can't, reading a comic is something you gotta sit and, focus on. Yeah. But music, yeah, it really does. We talked, for Christ's sake, we talked about like what, if there's a heaven, what it might sound like. And it's not a big screen of Rocky playing, which would be pretty sweet. Maybe the fanfare from Rocky is what you hear. Fuck it. But, yeah. From freaking Creed.
Rocking the shit.
Yeah. Yeah, let's end it with Creed. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, look, so much of what I love about music stems from the Beatles, and so much of those bands I love, it stemmed from them, for the Beatles too.
Yeah.
Even if they're the same age, they just were inspired by the Beatles. They're just huge, and I don't think it can ever be overstated, But it's fun. I always love when people ask me that, like, why do we still talk about the Beatles? Why do the Beatles matters? Are they really number one? Should they be, this or that? And hopefully this podcast helped answer that question.
I really hope so. I mean, otherwise we've just done, 16 episodes of whatever the fuck. It's like you're trying to explain what love is, man.
Yeah.
It just is. It's just there. Just like the Beatles.
Yeah, if you really want to find out, listen to music.
Yeah. Do what you love. And love what you do. This has been the last episode of Deconstructing the Beatles. I'm Sam.
I'm Jake.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a new commentary every Monday. We've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.